So it's been a great experience. I worked as a consultant, and now I'm the director here, and I've had a great time in library world. This is actually my 5th year offering this session for Apple, and I have been involved with strategic planning for over the past 15, 16 years. And I've participated in planning in libraries and governmental organizations and nonprofit organizations. That's been the main crux of my experience. I have some limited experience in business strategic planning, but not much, because most of my work has been in the public sector. Now, having said all this, I am by no means an expert in strategic planning. So any input that I get today will be wonderful. I love participation. I love people sharing their opinions and their thoughts. So please, if you have them, use the chat or just chime in. I can stop talking. I don't have a problem with that either. I'm a librarian, so I share. A few housekeeping things with the actual class that you'll be participating in this month on Moodle. I have one assignment, and there are 4 different options there. All you have to do is one of those options. My hope is that after this session today and with that assignment, that you'll be able to feed this information into your own strategic planning process. I don't want to create more work or busy work for you. That's not something I intend to do. I want this to actually help you in your work in the library. So what I'm presenting today, because of all the different ways of doing strategic planning out there currently, I've combined 3 different types of strategic planning. One is strategic doing, another one is strategic thinking, and then the traditional strategic planning. I've taken all 3 of those and turned those into one very easy way of doing planning. So let's jump in. As soon as I find the right clicker to click there we go. So our overview for today, we'll be talking about what is strategic planning and why it's important. Then we'll be going through the strategic planning process. We'll talk about vision and mission statements, where we are right now in the library with our services and what we're providing for our libraries. We will also talk about input into the strategic plan, how to shape the plan, output, and then the most important part, celebrating your accomplishments and creating a strategic plan, but then also celebrating your accomplishments and getting the strategic plan goals completed. It's very important to celebrate. We all like celebrations. As Robin was talking about, it's hard to pull away from the bar at KLA, and sometimes we like cake. As Jim Gaffigan said, that brings all people together. Even if you don't like them, you'll still go down and eat a piece of cake. So please enjoy celebrating your accomplishments. So are there any questions starting off about what we'll be talking about today? Any thoughts? Okay, seeing none, hearing none, we'll venture forth. Okay, so why is planning important? And why do we do it, or what it is and why we do it? So I like to say it's the difference between react and respond. When we react, we sometimes dump money into a hole or throw it down the toilet or set it on fire or whatever cliche you want to use. So having a strategic plan and having mission and vision statements allow you to respond to different things that come your way. Technology is a great example of that. What technology we're going to hold, grasp onto and bring into the library. It's a huge thing. And if we reacted to everything that came down the line, we wouldn't have a budget. So that's one thing I like to say is react and respond. Another thing is using limited resources efficiently and effectively. So I'm going to poll you guys, who has enough money that they can do everything that they want to in the library? All right, nobody's saying anything. So I imagine you're like everybody else and you don't have enough money to do what you want.
No hands were raised, but lots of giggling happened.
Yeah, I saw some of it. Yes, I love it. I love it. So there we go. So we've got a plan in order to use that money efficiently and to make it stretch. Yeah. So before we get into the planning process, though, some things I want to talk about here. One, do you currently have a plan? Two, if you don't and you want to write one, how do you determine who's going to be a part of writing a plan? Is it going to be board members, staff, community members, stakeholders, such as government officials? Another thing to remember in doing planning is everyone should have a job in developing and implementing the plan that is a part of this committee and on staff at the library and on the board. So it shouldn't just be the director's job. Now, I know I've probably lost 3 or 4 of you because you said, I will never get my board to do this. Well, let's talk about that a little later on and see if we can maybe talk through strategies that you can try and get your board to and more involved. Everybody that's involved in the process will have homework. Sessions for planning should only last an hour. You go beyond that hour, you lose people. Sometimes beyond 15 minutes, you lose people. I see that in some of the mayors at board meetings, and it's great. 15 minutes, they're done. They're ready to go off to something else and have fun and talk about libraries. And someone needs to take care of taking notes and tracking all the assignments that are made during planning sessions. The big thing about planning that we need to understand up front too is that this is a living document. This isn't something you put aside and it's going to accomplish what you need to. Every day things change. Every month something happens. That plan needs to be adjusted. Maybe your focus changes. So remember, it's a living document. It can be changed and upgraded and adjusted. And then the other thing is having a timeline, keeping deadlines, and holding participants accountable. Okay? So a couple other things as to why we do it. Strategic planning is the process by which guiding members of an organization envision its future and develop necessary procedures, operations to achieve that future. So we've got process, guiding members, envision its future, develop procedures and operations in order to achieve that future. So strategic planning, which can be defined as a review of current and past performance, an assessment of possible short-term impacts, and a plan for creating the best possible future. Again, we're seeing a lot of the same things repeated over there. True strategy is about placing bets and making hard choices. The objective is not to eliminate risk, but to increase the odds of success. Okay, so those came from strategic planning people who this is their profession. And if you want to see any of those quotes and where they came from, those will be in the notes for this session that I've put on the Moodle site. Okay, so let's move on to our next slide here. So this is the actual planning process as I see it. First, we take a look at the statements that you have currently, your mission and vision statements. If you don't have them, I would recommend writing some. And we'll get into that a little later. If you have some, I recommend looking at them. And if they're up to date, great, you're a step ahead. I also like to say we need to see where we're at now. And this doesn't have to be an exhaustive list, but all the things that you're doing in the library right now, story time, photocopying for patrons, faxes, maker spaces, whatever you're doing to serve your patrons in your community and to be one of those founding parts of your community or one of the bedrock pieces of your community or the hub or however you want to put it. All those activities that you're doing to be that. And then we'll have inputs that we'll put in, and these will come from those things that you look at where we are now. You'll evaluate those and see what is working and what isn't based on statistics that you draw on those things. Input is also looking at the demographic information on your community. Before in this class, I've always had at least one person who's done the assignment who's looked at the demographic information in their community and they've said, I didn't realize that I had this and this in my community. Um, we all assume we know what our community is made of. You know, old people, if you're out here in Western Kansas, some of these communities are dying, and you just got a lot of older people. And so you assume that, but when you look at that demographic information, sometimes it tells you a little something about your community you didn't realize. Along with that is also the ideas of where you want to take the library, different things you might want to include in your library. So those inputs are very important. And then you take those inputs and then you shape your plan as to what it's going to look like. For all of you, I would recommend nothing bigger than 1 page. We don't need this thing to be so exhaustive that it's going to kill you to try and accomplish this. 1 page, couple goals with various action steps in accomplishing those goals. So then once you shape it, then you've got your plan, and now it's time to get to work and accomplishing that plan. And then to celebrate after it's all done. Then as you'll see here, once you accomplish a goal, then the whole thing starts over again. You go back to the input phase. So let's say you want to put in a teen area in your library. So you set a goal, you get some steps in accomplishing that goal, you get all the budget and everything set up. Then you go and you actually get it done. You get a teen area. You celebrate that with a big party when you open the teen area. And then once that's done, then you come back to the input and say, okay, we got that done. Now we're working on these other 2 goals, but what do we want to put as a goal now in place of that teen area? Do we want to now have a marketing campaign to make sure that teenager area is utilized? And that's how this process goes. It's a constant flow. So hopefully you'll see that once we get moving into all of this. Okay, so let's talk about mission and vision statements. And this is where we need some participation here. Why do we have a mission statement?
I think everybody's muted, but you can unmute yourself or you can use the chat room. Either way, I'm keeping an eye on both.
Or they might be thinking, isn't that the thing that we write on a bronze plaque and put in the front of the library and really never pay attention to, except when we have to dust it? Wow, it's quiet.
It is. Everybody's still cold. Kyle says that's about what we do with ours at Overbrook. Delaware says it determines the company's direction and purpose.
Okay.
Drita from Centralia says to let everyone know what we intend to do, which I like that a lot. Kyle also says he noted in the survey, I guess the one that you sent out, that his is very broad. Marion says so everyone has an idea of why their library does what they do.
Very good.
Good answers.
Yes, I love all those answers, and I really love Pat's because it segues into something I want to show you here. Oh, we got another one here. Let's see. It explains what we do and why the community should pay for it. I like that one too. Great. Okay, so have all of you heard of Seamon? Sorry. He is a visioner and he trains on leadership. Carolyn, I saw you kind of stick your hand up. You've heard of him? And he's done some great and powerful talks on leadership and planning and things of that nature. And so, okay, sorry. So I'm going to show you a video here. It's about 18 minutes. Now, don't lose focus. I know it's a video. You want to lose focus. Don't lose focus. Watch this because this is a very powerful message that he has to share. So hopefully, let me see if I can get my sharing to work here. Stop share. Okay, and share screen. And there we go. Okay, everybody hopefully can see it. Let's start this.
I'm not hearing sound, George.
Drat. Okay, let me try this a different way. No sound. Very good. Yes, close sharing. Okay, I have a backup. Well, I thought I had a backup. There we go. Okay, there we go. Okay, here we go. We'll try this again. Sorry about that. Okay, can you see it now? Let's see if this works. Do we have sound?
Thinking if you hear it, we should be able to hear it, but
Yeah. Well, this one's got the subtitles, so hopefully that will. Okay, so right there, that circle that he drew, we'll go to this point since it's not working properly. That circle there that he drew is the important part of this whole talk. And I will send out a link to the talk after we're done here so that you can all watch this on your own. It is very powerful, it is good, and it goes to the heart of planning and who we are and what we do. But what he tells us in this talk is that people don't really care what we do. They care about why we do it. Okay? And he goes on to give examples of Apple, the Wright brothers, and Martin Luther King Jr. He says that Apple sells us on why they're doing what they do instead of what they do. Same with the Wright brothers. He said there was actually competition for the Wright brothers. The guy had more money, had more brilliant people working for him, and they should have achieved flight sooner. But they focused on the why they were doing it. And then again, Martin Luther King Jr. is another example. There were other orders that were just as powerful as him, but he focused on the why. And so the point of that in this part of the planning is a mission and vision statement should lead where our organization is going. and what our organization is about. It should be the why of who we are. And if we don't know the why of who we are as a library, then we need to really look and focus on that.
Jerry actually asked, why do we do public libraries, as you were talking about the why. And I think the mission statement is a good way to kind of, what you're talking about, distill that and
Yes.
figure out why you do what you do.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So the mission statement is the why. The vision statement is where we're going. Now, I don't want you to have these statements and put them on the wall in a bronze plaque and then dust them every once in a while because they start to look bad. I want this to be on paper. This needs to be on the agenda for every board meeting. This needs to be everywhere. And this should guide your decision making. Okay, if your vision is to become a library that is reader-centric, then that should guide every decision you make in the library. That should guide the process that you're going through to make a strategic plan. If you're reader-centric, then why would you be spending money on buying a 3D printer? If you're reader-centric, why are you buying computers? Okay, now, I also don't want you to be that narrow, because if you're narrow and saying this is the one thing we're going to do, then you're not going to be able to accomplish being a living organism that libraries are. But that's just an example boiled down to show you how that works. Okay? So the vision then should say, we want to become a reader-centric library. Okay? So in that process, that should guide then your strategic plan. Does that make sense to everybody? This should be an important part of who you are and should be one of your fundamental bedrock founding statements.
When people are given them a chance to chat, they have questions. When I worked at my former library in Missouri, I was the information technology manager, so I had to do the technology planning. And one of the things I did was I printed out the mission and vision statement of the library, and I had them taped to my wall next to me. So every time I turned around, I was faced with the mission of my library and the decisions that I made as the manager, either from, buying new computers, posting stuff on social media, everything kind of had to point back to that mission. And so that's one way to use that. If you've got a good mission, it's easy to incorporate it in.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't see any comments yet. So
okay, so let's go back to sharing my PowerPoint here. There it is. Okay, so there's that. And that is why at one time they put them in bronze and put them on plaques and hung them on walls, because they knew it was an important part of who they were. It was important to remind the community of who they were. But in today's day and age, mission and vision statements tend to change. And that's because maybe the thought process has changed. And so this is something you'll want to revisit a couple times throughout a 5-year period. Maybe every other year you want to take a look at that mission and vision statement and make sure that it's still relevant to your library. Okay? All right. So let's move on now to how we would develop this mission and vision statement. One thing that I think is very important, of course, is getting your board buy-in, but also staff buy-in for this. And so one thing I would do is do a little activity with your staff at a staff meeting or with your board at a board meeting. And you can ask them a simple question. Why does the library exist? That question that kind of goes back to what Jerry put up there. Why do we do the public library? Why are we here? And then have them write down or talk about it and somebody take notes and get an idea of why they think the library is there. Do the same thing with the staff. And it doesn't have to be a long activity. I mean, this can be a quick 10-minute, 15 minutes. You'll find that it'll grow bigger than that, though. And then for the vision statement, say, well, what do you think the library is going to look like in 3, 5, 10 years? What would you like the library to look like in 3, 5, 10 years? If the newspaper was going to write an article about the library 3 years from now, what do you think they'd write? How about 5 years from now? 10 years from now, what would they write? One thing that I've used with libraries is, okay, I want you to write a love letter or a breakup letter with your library. And I think that that came from your very first session. But that's a good activity to look at this. I've had some people want to break up with their library, and so they went through the process to figure out why and renovated their library to be what they wanted it to be. So this can really help in developing those statements that you're looking for. Your statements should reflect the values of your community. They don't need to be perfect, so don't get caught up in wordsmithing this thing. Statements should be no more than 1 or 2 sentences, capture the end goal. I like to say from Shakespeare, brevity is the soul of wit. But dream big, be inspirational, clear, concise, memorable, free of buzzwords and jargon. It needs to be understandable, and you need to think outside your library. And a couple of key terms to avoid would be educational reading, books, recreational reading, things of that nature. Okay, any questions? And I know your regional library systems would help you in developing a mission or vision statement. I'm going to say that and hope that they support me in that. I think they will. Okay, no questions? All right, thank you. We'll now move on to our next slide. Okay, so this is that part in the process where I was talking about looking at where we are now. So this is as simple as sitting down with your staff, because that's going to be a group that's going to be able to help you with this, and list all the current services that you have right now in your library. List out story time, all of that, everything you do, circulating books, circulating DVDs, circulating audiobooks, all of that, just so that you know what you're currently doing. If you can find statistics for those, great, because that will then help you decide how effective those services are. So if your story time you're having and you're only getting 3 kids there, and there are 150 kids in your community, then maybe it's time to set a goal to figure out a different way to do story time, something like that. So that's where those statistics tie into your current list of services. Also, and this is something I try to stress, find out anecdotal information. And this is something simple. A lot of people are like, oh, but that's hard. I have to do surveys. No, you don't. Anecdotal information comes from just talking to your patrons. If somebody comes up to check out a book, just ask them a question. Do you like this genre? What do you think about the library shelving? Just ask a question. You'll get feedback. It's story time. Ask a parent, how do you think story time's helping your child? Simple as that. You'll get information. And then once you get that information, make sure you write it down so you know what's going on. This is how I get great stories is I go out, and whenever I'm on rotation or I'm out visiting a library, I'll talk to some of the patrons that are there. My libraries sometimes get nervous because they think I'm checking up on them, and that's not what I'm doing. I'm actually seeing how the library is effectively serving them. And then I can bring these stories back to them and say, hey, your patron over there just told me this and that. A great story that I got one time from a library, I was there, and I was talking to a parent about the library and their child coming to story time and things like that. And she said, my child has improved in her reading skills because of story time. We don't get to sit down and read books with her as often as we'd like, because dad's in and out of the house with work, mom's coming home late making dinner, so we don't get to do it as often. But she says, when I get a chance to bring her to story time, she says, I get to sit there and read books with her, and the story time reads books with her, and it's helped her immensely because we can't do it normally. And so something as simple as just asking them a question like that can bring a powerful story forward. So please take those opportunities to just talk with your patrons. So then some ways to evaluate your current services. Cost analysis. We don't want to always have money involved in it, but if something is costing per patron a great deal of money compared to other services, it might be time to look at a way to adjust that service to make it not so costly on your budget. Usage, community value, all those things can come into play when you're looking at the cost of a service. So what you really want to do from that is determine what your library is currently doing well and what your library is currently struggling with and what needs to maybe be changed. So activities for this, again, news article, breakup letters, those kinds of things will also bring that kind of information forward if you're asking people, board, staff, things like that. Anecdotal information, or just seeing that $10,000 of your budget's going towards this and you've got 6 people that use it. A great example of that was hard for us here at Northwest is we had a books by mail program that we were operating. So a patron would send in their request for books and we would send them to them in the mail free of charge with return postage. These were paperback books. It was a wonderful service, but we only had 71 people using it throughout the entire region. We tried everything we could to expand it. We sent out catalogs to every rural address. We sent out letters. We did everything we could. We really marketed this thing, and we still only had 71 patrons or so. We started looking at it, and we were spending almost $300 per patron on that. And it became to the point where it was just too costly for those 71 patrons. And so we took those funds then and shifted them towards our subscription then to Sunflower eLibrary. And that has grown immensely throughout the entire region. And so that was one change we had to make. It was hard because we didn't want to let down the 71 patrons, but at the same time, we knew we needed to grow in a different direction. And so that was one of those decisions we made based on finance, which I think has really been a good decision for us, because those 71 patrons, half of them now are using Sunflower eLibrary, and so we still are serving them. So there you go. That's part of gathering your current services and statistics. Any questions on that? Okay. And so, yeah, that last slide, I guess I forgot to forward the slide, sorry. So here are some things that you can do in data collection analysis as well. One thing that one of the activities that you have is public library statistics. That's another very valuable way of comparing your library with other libraries of like size. And then, of course, focus groups if you want to. And then community needs is another great one. Great example here, we didn't have a good after-school program in Norton. And so I was talking with Norton Public Library on what we could do to help out with this issue, because we had a lot of children running around town after school and they didn't have anything to do. And so we worked with the Norton Public Library to develop, of course, a Lego club, which I know a lot of you probably have. We started an art club, chess club, and then they started doing some other things, story times after, not really story times because these are older children, but something of that nature after school the other days. And it's been a huge success. They've had a lot of kids going to these various clubs and activities, and we see a lot less kids on the street running around doing things they shouldn't. So community needs always a big part of what we do. So any other questions about data collection?
The only thing we really have is Carolyn said they have that problem as well, the after school kids not having a whole lot to do. So
yes, yeah.
I think that's fairly common.
Absolutely. And so if you can help in some way making partnerships in the community to develop some of these clubs, it's kind of interesting. I was talking with some folks from the K-State Extension, and they have a lot of different activities that they do. And it's amazing how they will come with an activity ready to do into the library and just do it. So partnering with other organizations such as K-State or 4-H or any of those can help bring those programs into your library to give the kids something to do after school without you having to do a lot of the work to do it.
Kyle
Yes.
also asked, for statistics, are you talking about the state library numbers for Kansas, or is there somewhere good to get national stats for libraries of similar size?
At this point, I'm talking about the library statistics that the state library has. Now, one thing that the state library does with those numbers is they then, once they've gone through the numbers, then they give them to, I believe it's IMLS, and they then compile the national statistics. And so there is a way of getting those national statistics, and I will look that up and send that out to you if you'd like. But I usually just use the state statistics, but you can definitely use the national ones and get a better idea too. Okay, very good. Any other questions or thoughts? Okay. All right. All right, so goals and objectives and activities. So as I said earlier, whenever you're developing a strategic plan, don't make it huge. Make it a one-page thing, maybe 3 goals. So then you want those goals to follow SMART. I think all of you've probably heard of that: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time framed. So you want those so that you have an idea of what it is you want to accomplish. You don't want it so broad that you don't actually know what it is. You want to be able to measure whenever you accomplish that goal so that you can have that celebration. You want to make it attainable. You don't want to, be having 3 kids at your story time and say, oh, we're going to have 100 by the end of the year. Definitely not attainable. And the goal needs to be relevant to your mission and your vision, where you're going. And of course, having a time frame for that. We want to go from 3 kids a story time to 10 by the end of the year. And then this is how we're going to go about accomplishing it. Okay, so follow SMART. It's a very good way of writing goals. SWOT analysis helps you, and whenever you're analyzing your data that you have, and your community and things like that, to look at strengths and weaknesses in your community and your library, and then opportunities and threats that are there. And so implementing SWOT analysis, if you look it up, there's tons of information on it out there, and it's pretty simple to use. It's basically just a grid, and you can help identify what the strengths of your library are, weaknesses, and things like that. And so from that, then you can feed that information into creating goals. Another big thing is guiding principles in writing goals. So guiding principles are how we are going to achieve our goals. Respect, we embrace diversity and treat everyone with courtesy and equity and fairness. Integrity, we operate openly and hold the highest ethical standards. Agility, we are devoted to constant innovation and improvement in our services. And then dedication, we are proudly committed to providing outstanding customer service. Other guiding principles that are out there are state standards. We have state standards for public libraries. Each of the regional library systems have copies of that. It's on the joint website. And those state standards have been updated in 2016. And so that's another great guiding principle whenever you're writing goals. Your local standards from your regional library systems. I know Northeast and a few of the other library systems have standards that they have set for their libraries. And also following the 5 laws of library science by Raghunathan. Books are for use. Every reader his or her book. Every book its reader. Save the time of the reader, and the library is a growing organism. Now, you can also add things in there besides books, but this is a great look at how we can serve those that come into the library. So that's basically what the guiding principles are. So as you're developing your SMART goal, remember the guiding principles. And then there's also something called strategic filters. So those strategic filters would be, you'd ask yourself, well, is this going to meet a community need? Are there people in my community that already offer this service, and is there a way that I could partner with them? Does this fit into our infrastructure, the physical library or the website or something of that nature? And is this something currently relevant? So as you're developing these goals, you might say, oh, well, this part of this goal actually isn't relevant, or this is something that 4-H does. So maybe we can partner with them to make this a successful thing. So those are all part of writing these goals and keeping all these things in mind. And then, of course, you've got your priorities, and then allocating resources so that you can accomplish these goals, and then accountability and reporting. So making sure that you're accountable in accomplishing these goals and that you're reporting this. Now, this is the piece that's very important. Making your strategic plan, once you write it and you've developed all this and you've gone through this process, and as I said, we don't want to sit this on the shelf. It needs to be a living, breathing document. Accountability and reporting happens at the board level. So this should be a part of a board meeting every month. How are we doing on these strategic goals that we've set? If the board chair is somebody who's helping in accomplishing part of this goal, asking them, okay, how's this part of your step coming? Are you getting these things accomplished? Let's get a report on it. And having that report come back to the board then. This should be a major piece in a board meeting. I know a lot of our boards are so stuck on statistics and how many books you circulated and yada, yada, yada. Really, the board should be discussing the strategic plan at every board meeting. If they love statistics and want those statistics, great. You can compile something at the end of the year and they can see how many things circulated throughout the year and the ups and downs and everything like that. But really the big part of their day-to-day should be looking at the strategic plan and how you're accomplishing these goals. Okay. So any questions on that? Unfortunately, with strategic planning, I'm throwing a lot at you in an hour. And so after you get these notes off of Moodle and you look through them again, if you have any questions, you can email me. I am more than willing to answer any questions you have that I can. Or if it's beyond me, I'll say, well, Robin can answer it, or Kim Rudder at Southeast can answer it, or so on and so forth throughout the system, because there's lots of system folks that would be able to help you with this as well. But any questions right now on shaping that goal? Okay, very good. Okay, so let's move on now to output. So this is going to be the goal itself. So results of meeting goals. So once you've got your plan in place, that's part of your output, but then also meeting the goals is going to be part of your output. Yeah, very good. Thank you, Kim. That's exactly right. So the results of meeting these goals. So that's what we're going to be looking for as an output from our strategic plan. So how do we measure and evaluate whether this is working? One thing Kim said right there, your statistics will show that. If your goal was to increase to 10 children at story time, every time you make a hash mark for every kid that's in there, however you count it, you'll put that into your statistics and you'll see how you're doing. And see, that's where the living part of this document comes in. If after 5 months you see that you haven't been able to accomplish this goal, that's where you can then adjust and say, well, this is another thing that we need to do to start marketing the story time. is do this. And then that will help us hopefully get over the hump. That's where this is a living document, so you can make those adjustments. I'm not saying to get rid of the goal. I'm saying to make the adjustment to figure out another way to increase or to achieve that goal. Okay. And this is something great to talk with boards during board meetings. This is why that's a part of the board meeting agenda, so that you can talk to them about this and say, hey, we're going to need your help doing this. So there's that part. Of course, cost analysis. If you're into it 6 months and it's not successful via cost analysis, maybe you need to make an adjustment on that cost analysis and make sure that you can try and keep costs down or increase the amount of people using it. Anecdotal, you might find that it's a great success. I had a librarian who they started a Lego club. And when they started, didn't have a lot of kids coming. So they adjusted, started getting more publicity out there, kids talking about it at school, things like that. Started getting more and more kids coming in. And then one day she was working on cleaning up the Legos. And one of the kids that used to stay after school all the time to help was there. And he was a quieter kid, didn't have a lot of friends, wasn't a very successful kid in school. And he was helping her clean up. And this day he was helping her, and he said, Miss Librarian, he said, I want to be a librarian someday. And she said, oh, well, great. That's a great thing. Why do you want to be a librarian? And he says, because they help change people's lives. And then he went on to say that he loved Lego Club so much that it changed him. He said, I've actually started talking to more of the kids in my class by coming to Lego Club. I've actually been able to share some of the things that I know with other kids at Lego Club. And he started realizing that he couldn't say it this way, but his self-esteem was getting better because of Lego Club. To me, that's a success. That program right there is a success because you've reached the one that needed it. And so that anecdotal is very important. And imagine if you can take that story then to an elected official and say, this is why the library is important. That's powerful. Marketing is another way of measuring things, seeing how the marketing is doing and reaching people and getting people to realize what's going on in the library, if you're doing it or not. Another big thing that I always tell my libraries is you can't just give it 2 months, and if it doesn't work, give up on it. We've noticed statistically from some of our libraries, it takes 2 to 3 years before it fully becomes a part of the conversation in a community to really start to reach. So give a program some time. As I said, you can make adjustments to it, but give it some time. Same with goals. Give those goals some time. And a great thing to do is have benchmarks along the way. An example of that, so you got 3 kids coming to story time, you want 10, say, okay, in 3 months, we want to have 5. Have benchmarks along the way so that you can say, hey, look, we got 5. This is a success. Do a little celebration, and then keep working towards it. Ongoing evaluation is always important. And, if you need to change one of those dates that you've set for your goal, change it. If you look at it and you say, this is a bigger project than we have, say, it's not going to be accomplished in a year. It's going to take 3 years. Change that date. And then have that ongoing evaluation to see how successful we're doing along the way. Some of the other things that you need to watch out for are pitfalls. Pitfalls to the process. So this process, like I said, it involves creating the goal and then accomplishing the goal and then starting over, getting your inputs, things like that. In this process, there are pitfalls. So no clear direction is a huge pitfall. Have that direction put in there. So your goal is we want to increase attendance at story time. Our objective is we want to go from 3 to 10 students in a year, and then each of your underlying steps that you're going to take to accomplish that. We're going to market this in the schools. We're going to send out flyers to the schools so that they can get this out to children, because more than likely they have younger siblings. Or we're going to go to the Mother's Club here in town and share with them what we're doing at Storytime. We're going to get into each of the daycares in our community and let them know what we're doing at Storytime. That's kind of how you're developing this, and that gives you a direction. And you can set a time limit for each of those steps too. We're going to talk to each of the daycares by May, and then judge then, see how things are going with how many kids are coming to Storytime. So have a clear direction there. You don't want this thing to just be wishy-washy and nebulous so that you can't accomplish anything. Learn how to say no. Sometimes your board might come up with a crazy goal that's something that you know you're not going to be able to achieve. Learn how to say no. Say no, but maybe we can do this instead. Give them another option. Because it's so important that we don't get so big-minded that we lose the possibility of accomplishing these goals. Because when you have just things out there nebulously going on, you're going to set that on the shelf and it's not going to accomplish anything, and you're going to go away and you're going to be shooting from the hip again. Or you're going to think, I'm a failure because I can't accomplish these goals. So learn to say no. Learn to prioritize. So you want to get more children into Storytime. You want to build your collection of children's books up, and you want to have more computers in the library for kids to use after school. Prioritize which one of those is more important to you and accomplish that first. Or make sure that you're prioritizing different steps with those goals. I mean, there's lots of different ways of doing it, but make sure that you prioritize what you're doing. Diversify your plan. And don't starve some programs in order to accomplish things in your plan. Make sure that you have funding for the things that you want to continue to do, and then find that funding for the other things that you want to do in your plan. And of course, revisit that process continually. Like I said, if it's a part of your library board agenda, you're going to be revisiting that thing every month, and you can make adjustments to it every month if you need to. So don't fall for these things that you shouldn't revisit and things of that nature. Okay. Any questions? Okay, and the last part, celebrate your accomplishments. That is very important. Have a party for you and your staff and your board, whatever. Bring in a root beer, jug of root beer and party. I don't know. So you probably don't want to bring in a keg of beer. That might look bad at the library. So, or hors d'oeuvres or something. I don't know. But celebrate. Bring in cookies.
Cupcakes are always appropriate.
Hey, I love cupcakes. Absolutely. But celebrate your accomplishments once you achieve them. If there are staff that are involved, recognize them for that. Pat them on the back. I mean, that's very important for them to also receive recognition of being a part of something. If you don't have staff, recognize yourself. I mean, doggone it. You're by yourself in a library, and you're working your butt off to make sure everybody has the services they need, and you get this thing accomplished. Celebrate it for yourself. Just make sure you're celebrating what you get done. So that's the end of what I have. Like I said, I'd like to go into more detail on some of these things, but an hour is all I have, and I wouldn't want to bore you with more anyway. But are there any questions at this point that you have for me? And again, these notes are online on Moodle. You can get access to them. I will let you have a direct link for that Seamon Senek video. I'll put it on Moodle as well. And I'll also send it to Robin so she can email it to you so you can access it however you need to. And I will also, for Kyle, look up those National Library statistics, and I will get you a link for those as well. And like I said, if you have any questions, please email me. As you're going through this process, if you have any questions on what I've said here, let me know. And like I said, if you feel more comfortable reaching out to your system consultants, do that too. They'll be here to help you. So.
All right, I don't see anything in the chat window, so it looks like they're still processing.
I bet. I would be too. This was the proverbial fire hose. Yeah. And drinking from it.
All right. Well, I'm seeing a lot of thanks and great sessions. So I think just remember to log into Moodle so that you can look over these notes and do the homework that George has assigned for this session. If you have any questions about Moodle, you can get a hold of your system representative or me, whichever. Sometimes I'm both, I guess. Yeah, if you have any questions, George is very approachable. So, and your system representatives are always available to help as well. So, all right, well, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.